Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I begin in the name of the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. This is our fourth session of learning Arabic language, Arabic for the beginners. We did the metrics, the Gardan for Arab of Rafa in the last session. Today we're going to do the metrics Gardan of the other two Arab, which are Nasab and Jar. And then we'll proceed to make an attempt to understand where the application of the understanding of these Arab is to be found. So let's move on and let's take Nasab first. Remember that in the last session we have already done Rafa. Now we move on to Nasab. Again, the same metrics. We begin with singular noun, then we'll have plural, we'll have double, and then plural. Remember that Arabic has this unique feature of having a completely distinct word for two nouns, for double, and then we have plural, and there is masculine and there is feminine. Thankfully, there is no space left for me to complete the words, and therefore I'm not embarrassed for making spelling mistakes. So let's move on with the same word, alim, and when it is singular masculine, I hope that you will get it right even before I writing it. It's aliman. Aliman is nasab, but written with an additional alif, just as a convention for writing. When it comes to double, to alim in the form of nasab, you will not be able to predict it unless you know it already. It's alimaini, which again defeats the understanding, goes against the normal expectation that nasab is probably associated with fatha or zabar, but not exactly over here. And then in plural, it's alimina. Alimina. Notice that as far as the word alim is concerned, it's not getting broken, altered in any of these words. It's the same. It's the last part of the word that gets changed, altered to accommodate the expectation of the Arab, which in this case is nasab. We move on to singular feminine, and it's alimatan. Now, some of you may have got it wrong by adding an alif here as well, but that's not correct. The rule is that when you write double fatha, tanween of fatha, towards the end of a word, and it's masculine, it's only then that an alif is going to be added, not when it's feminine with a ta at the end. When it comes to two women scholars, it's alima taini, just an addition of a ta to alimaini. And when it comes to many women scholars, it's alimatin. In the case of Rafa, remember it was alimatun. In case of Nasab, it is alimatin. Now, let's move on and try to place alif lam at the beginning and what you have is al-alim, al-alima. That is, there is a single fatha at the on top of mim, and off goes the alif, which was there only because there were two fathas tanween. Alimaini doesn't change considerably. It's al-alimain, except for the fact that there is an addition of al, nothing else that changes. Likewise is the case with al-alimina. Here you have al-alima, al-alimata, al-alimataini, which is going to come here, and al-alimat. Quite right. Some of you have already predicted that this one of them is going to disappear. That's true. So the rule is that with the addition, inclusion of alif lam preceding a noun, the tanween, the double symbol, whether it is for dhamma or fatha or kasra, is removed, it disappears. And that's what has happened over here. If there is only one symbol, then it would stay as it is. That was nasab. Now we move on to jar, the third of the three possibilities of i'rab. I make use of the same metrics, and you would find that nasab and jar are not substantially different from each other when it comes to double and plural nouns. Obviously, in the case of singular, you will have alimin. No alif, because this is now kasra, this is jar. Two alim in the form of jar is alimaini. Exactly the same way as it was in the case of nasab. More than two, plural is alimina. No change whatsoever from nasab. Here, alimatin, one alim scholar, lady. Two lady scholars is alimataini, and many lady scholars, exactly the same way as in the case of nasab, is alimatin. You add alif lam, and what you have is one kasra removed where there are two, and no change whatsoever if there are already one, like it's in double and plural. Alimatin obviously is going to be alimati. Alimataini is going to remain al-alimataini, alimatin, and the same as in the case of nasab, one of the two kasras of tanween disappear. That's what is the jar form when it comes to its appearance. Obviously, you must be wondering as to what's going on. But, I hope that the disappointment and the lack of your ability to understand is now over. Because we are now going to talk about the reasons why is it that we have the three different forms of i'rab. Okay, now we move on to the conceptual part. The usefulness of knowing what different Arab of a noun are and how do they appear, the usefulness comes in when we start understanding as to when a noun would appear in a sentence in the Arab of Rafa. What are the occasions where it appears in the form of nasab, and on what occasions do nouns appear in the Arab of jar? When you already know what is Rafa in appearance, what is nasab the way it is, and what is jar, you already have an understanding which is going to come in handy. Now let's start making use of what we have already learned as far as figures, forms, appearance is concerned. Let's take first the question of why a certain noun is going to appear in the form of Rafa. Once you know why nouns take the form of Rafa, and you have a list of all possibilities, you will, when you read a text, for example in the Quran, and you are able to figure out that a certain noun has appeared in the form of Rafa, and you have a checklist of the number of possibilities why a noun can take a form of Rafa, you will be able to gradually develop the ability of understanding as to what kind of role this noun is playing in this particular sentence. So let's move on now. We're talking about now Rafa. If a certain noun comes in the form of Rafa, there could be only 4 possibilities. One, that it is mubtada. What is mubtada? Let's say it's the starter. Is the starter. What does it mean? I'll let you know. Then the other possibility is that it is khabar, which is information. The third is file, which is subject. And the fourth is that it is naib file. Now, if somebody points out that this word naib doesn't appear to be Arabic, well, I won't object to that objection, because that's true. It's a kind of Persian way of writing it. It's more like a ya, but that's the way it's done. It's call it sort of subject, pseudo subject, or whatever, quasi subject. But that's there are different ways of trying to understand what it is. But let's move on. Now, what I'm saying is that whenever you have a noun appearing in a sentence in the form of Rafa, you've got to be absolutely clear that there are only 4 possibilities why a noun, for example, al-alim, is in the form of Rafa. It could be either mubtada or khabar or file subject or naib file sort of subject. Now, what do they mean? Now, let's take them one by one. Let's take mubtada, starter, first. You see, in Arabic, there are only 2 categories of sentences. There is a sentence which is called ismiya, ismiya, khabariya. The sentence is jumla. Jumla is sentence. Ismiya, khabariya. That is, there is a sentence which giving information, right? And there is the other category of sentence which is called jumla, sentence, failure, which is giving the information of khabariya, of verb. Sentence giving information about a verb. Sorry, here it's information about a noun. So, in Arabic, there are only two ways that you can speak a complete sentence. It's either that you are talking about a noun and you are giving some information about that noun, or you are talking about a verb and you thus providing information as to who did it, what happened, and so on. Now, when you are talking about the first two of the four possibilities in Rafa, you're talking about the first sentence, jumla, ismiya, khabariya. And when you're talking about the next two possibilities, file and naib file, you're actually talking about the second category of sentences, which is jumla, failure, khabariya, sentence giving information about a verb. Now, let me first give you the example of mubtada and khabar. And obviously, when you're talking about it, you are talking about the first category of sentences. That is, first category is jumla, ismiya, khabariya. Now, let's take a simple example. Take the example of a house. House is bayt. This is a noun, bayt. Now, you want to say that the house that you're talking about is new. So, for that, the word is jadid. Obviously, this vocabulary is what one has to develop over a period of time. And obviously, when we read the Quran, the more we read, the more we understand, the more we resort to translations, the more vocabulary we are able to build up. Now, when you have a full sentence giving a complete meaning, the rule is that your mubtada, which literally means the one with which you begin, which is the starter. The mubtada, the noun, has to be always, when I say always, obviously this is predominantly the case, has to be proper noun. Now, here, bayt is, generally speaking, a common noun. In order for it to be made proper, you will add an alif lam, and it would become al-bayt. And the rule is, generally speaking, the khabar, the information that is being provided by this starter noun, is what information is always, or as I said, in most cases, it's common noun. So you keep it the way it is without adding a preceding alif lam, which is the of English. Now what? Now the question of i'rab. We have decided that both mubtada and khabar are rafa. So that's what it is. Al-baytu jadidun is a complete sentence, and what it means is that the house is new, or was new, or will be new. All three possibilities are there. I'll tell you why. But what I'm saying is that I mentioned that the i'rab of rafa, they appear on a noun used in a sentence for one of the four possibilities. It's either mubtada, the starter noun in a sentence, or khabar, the information in that sentence, which is jumla ismiya khabariya, sentence giving information about a noun. And these are the two possibilities, and there are two other possibilities, which are file, subject, or naib file, sort of subject, which we'll talk about later. But once a statement, a complete sentence is there, you do not need any assisting word. It's a complete statement. In English, we write is, was, will be, but in Arabic, it's complete. But with one additional dimension, and that is that here, because in this sentence, you do not have a verb. Therefore, this sentence can actually mean any of the three possibilities. It could mean past, present, or future. How would you differentiate? Well, the context would decide. When you use a sentence which is jumla ismiya khabariya, a sentence which is giving information about a noun, and you're using it in a context, well, the context would decide as to what the meanings are, whether they are to be understood in the past, present, or future. I'll give you an example. We use the same al-baytu jadidun, and I say that, there was a poor man, and he worked very hard and bought a house. And then comes the sentence, al-baytu jadidun. Obviously, the translation would be, the house was new. Was new. Why? Because the context is of the past, in the past. You say that, I've been very lucky. I have been able to purchase a house, al-baytu jadidun, and the house is new. And there could be a sentence that, for example, there are some workers who, if they are going to complete their tenure in the factory, in the plant, they shall be rewarded with a house so that they could live in it. And al-baytu jadidun, the house shall be new. It will be new. So it all depends on what the context is. So in Arabic, when you have a sentence which is giving you information about a noun, the sentence does not have normally a verb. There could be some cases it might have, but normally it doesn't have a verb. And it has a noun which is a starter, which is a proper noun, and then there is this information about that starter noun, which is normally a common noun, and the two put together, they give you a complete statement. And the reason why we are studying it is that both nouns, they appear in the form, in the Arabic form of rafa. Just briefly, if we move on to making the same example, and we say that there are two houses, al baytani jadidani. What we have done is that we have added ani to both bayt and jadid. And you already know that when it comes to rafa, in the case of double the noun, you add an ani and it really means two. So al-baytani, because of ani, is rafa and it's two. And jadidani, because of ani, is again two and is rafa. So the sentence, the meaning of the sentence is that the two houses are new. The two houses were new, or the two houses will be new. So obviously it would all depend on what the context is to decide as to what exactly are the meanings. But the important thing is that what we have studied as yet is that when a noun appears in the form of rafa, the noun can have four possibilities. One possibility is that it is muqtada, it is the starting noun of a sentence, or it is a khabar, it is the information in the sentence where there is a starting noun, and the two together make a sentence which is known as jumla ismiya khabariya, a sentence which is carrying a starting noun and giving information about it. And the other possibility of a sentence is that it is a jumla khabariya, fe'liya khabariya. There is a verb and you have information about that verb that has been mentioned. The other two possibilities of rafa, the third and the fourth possibility, are fa'il, that is the subject, and naib fa'il, which is a sort of subject, a quasi-subject, which is what we are going to do in the next session. May the Almighty enable us to understand Arabic as best as we can so that we are able to understand His book properly.